Hello, everyone. Welcome back for another week of Growing with My Fellow Growers. I'm your host, Jack Greenstock, joined as always by an amazing panel. I'm going to pass it over this week to the dark Spartan Grown if you're on YouTube. He's messing around with his video, getting it all hooked up, but here he is. He's coming into the light. Spartan.
Thanks, Jack. Yeah, I don't know what I did differently here. I'm going to figure something out. But I'm Spartan Grown. You can find me on Instagram at Spartan Grown, all one word, no spaces, or you can shoot me an email at spartangrown@gmail.com or russ@gmailarmy.com. I can help you with all your lighting or growing questions. Oh, I can't figure this camera out.
We'll hopefully get it figured out here pretty soon, but technical difficulties aside, next up, we've got Matthew Gates.
Yeah, hey everyone, Matthew Gates here. Yeah, I'm working on some videos lately, and I've been working with some people lately, IPM related and cannabis and elsewise. And yeah, I've been pretty busy here. But if you want to learn more, you can check me out at zenthanol.com or my YouTube channel is Zenthanol as well.
Very good to have you both as always. And next up, we've got Brandon Russ coming to us from the road. Just left the home state of
Yeah,
Ohio from Jack.
you guys can hear me all right. I am on the road. I was out in Ohio at a community event. I was out there with Yellow Wolf on his residing contract. Going to be doing all the breeding and a bunch of work with them on their brand.
All right, cool stuff. Exciting for sure. And next up, we've got Noah the Grower.
How's it going, everybody? Yeah, I'm Noah the Grower with two E's on Instagram. You can find me there. And most weeks here, I'm happy to be here.
Happy to have you back. And last and certainly not least of the panelists of this evening is the American one. Cheers, Tom.
Hello, chat panel and everyone in chat. I am the American one on YouTube and the American one underscore with underscore Geens over on the IG. And yeah, it's always good to be here. I hope everyone had a fun-filled 420. And yeah, good to be here.
Happy to be back. I will likely miss the show next week. I'll be with some family or well, really traveling during that time, but I'll probably be able to get it up and going for you guys because I should not be in the air or anything at the time that we're going live, but I'll be in between. But that being said, I'm happy that we are all here this week. It's good to have everybody together. Speaking of 420, I hope you all did have a good 420. Lady Greenstock and I celebrated our fourth wedding anniversary. We did a little road trip, stayed in a nice little anniversary room, did some fun type of things, did some mineral hot spring and horseback riding and a little bit of wine tasting. It was a really good time. Lots of weed smoking, tons of dabs, and gave out some free weed to some people at this little waterfall hike that we did. I was like on the way out of this one town, I'm like, I found this little waterfall. It's like a 10-minute hike or whatever. So take her to this waterfall. It's like all secluded. You're not even supposed to go. It's supposed to be closed, but one of the locals one of the locals is like, just go around the barrier. So we did, and we went, and it was worth the hike. No Coe Falls, really cool stuff. And it's beautiful. But when we got up there, a group who showed up behind us, one of them had like a cannabis branded lanyard on. And when we got back to the car, noticed that they were having a little session in their car as we were having a session in our car before we got on the road or whatever. But Lady Greenstock, being the weed fairy that she is, walked over and gifted them some like 4 joints. She's like, "Hey, I noticed that you guys were a token, and I just wanted to come say happy early 420 and hook you up with some joints." So it was a good time, and Lady G and I always really enjoy traveling together. So I'm very grateful to have her by my side as the road warrior that she is. We definitely, she's a good co-pilot, and we've been all over California, Arizona, and looking to see new things all the time. So it was a great experience for us. So I hope you all had a good 420. Anybody have some fun 420 experiences before we get into the kind of science talks?
I had a pretty chill 420 actually. I just got back from Brazil, or in Brazil, from Berlin on Thursday night, and then Friday, which was the night before 420, I was invited onto Fabroli's show, the Variables podcast. So I rang in 420 with him and Pedro. And they had a bunch of other people too on the panel. Racer X. I say I can't remember them all. I'm not going to try to remember them all, but it was cool to be on a big panel of people and just talking about something I don't really know a huge amount about, and that's concentrates. So that's cool. Ringing the new year with a bunch of my friends. Or new 420 year, I guess.
The year of the stoner. Another one comes around and goes around, and we're still here token along, token strong. And I really liked Seed Person One shared a meme, and it was Pinky in the Brain, and it said like something like we're gonna do the same thing we do every night, essentially. Like in the show, it was take over the world, but in this case, it was get stoned, which I think a lot of day-to-day stoners can relate to on 420. It's like, hey, another day that I'm gonna get stoned at night, but we make it a little bit more special. So getting some pop-up free trial, get real-time translation for this meeting. No, thank you, Zoom. I think I'll be all right. But yeah, it's really good times. I think if you like Lady in Greenstock and I do make a point to kind of pull aside from some good nugs from each batch that we get throughout the year and bust those out throughout our 420 and smoke on some of the best stuff throughout the year and see how
Oh
it's
yeah,
changed.
happy anniversary, Jack.
Thank you very much. It was a good one, and I've been very, very fortunate these past 4 years and even before that. And you have any 420 adventures that you got yourself into this year, Tao?
Not really. I pretty much just tried to overdose on edibles and smoked a lot. And yeah, I was like, you know, lurking on the YouTubes and a couple of shows. And but yeah, I passed out pretty early, I think, too, though. But nothing special this year, really. Just like Seed Person One me. I'm just doing what I usually do with maybe just add an extra couple edibles and extra smoke breaks. That's all.
Yeah, I mean, trying to overdose on edibles is sometimes a hero's journey for certain people because they're not quite ready for it. I know you're a daily edible guy, so you could probably handle it. And overdose on edibles is usually just a good nap. So it sounds like your day probably wrapped up a little early with some real good sleep and relaxing, pain relieving medical effects from some of those heavy dose edibles. I know I definitely at this point have such a high edible tolerance. It's you got to eat a lot to get where you're trying to go. And on a day like that, it's mixed in with dabs and joints and bong bowls and other things. So it was a pretty good time. Noah, did you grow anything exciting for you over there on this past 420?
No, not really. Just smoking and hanging out with other friends and family and stuff. And there was some edibles being passed around, some peanut butter cookies and stuff. And I ate a half one, but edibles isn't really my thing. I can kind of get a little, overdo it sometimes. So I just did a little bit, just smoking, nothing really crazy.
Nothing wrong with that. I think I actually prefer. We did our travel a little bit before 420, and then the day of 420 had more of a laid back day at the house, uh, smoking, eating good food, and having some good company, hanging out with some friends. So very good day. Brandon Rust, seems like you've been traveling. Did you do anything events wise for 420?
Yeah, so we were at the Ohio Cannabis 420 event at OhioCannabis.com, I guess, or like IT, but they had a little event, and we posted up with on the wall. And it's cool because we had like our own private security, the Hells Angels and the Red Devils showed up there, like our own private security, and it was pretty fucking rad, dude. It was like we met a lot of really cool people, and yeah, it was fun. We had an Airbnb right on the lake, and I got to see a good friend of mine out here, and
Sounds like it was a good time. I definitely like Ohio at the right times of year. If you're not there when it's snowy or freezing cold, then it's definitely much better.
fucking cold. We got there, we had to go to Walmart to get there. Like we went and got hand warmers, thermals, heaters.
Yeah, man, you got to be prepared. Ohio is like the kind of cold that will kill you. Canada knows, Michigan knows. Like if you're up north, it fucking gets so cold. You have to really layer up, wear proper jackets, gloves, boots, things like that. Make sure you keep yourself dry and warm. And at times it can be certainly difficult. I like going back 4th of July. I am going to be going back a little bit for just a weekend to surprise a family member who's graduating. So that'll be a nice little surprise. And yeah, good times. But I'm big fan of Ohio. I'm glad you got
Is
to
that
go
going
there,
to be
spend
in
a little bit of
June?
time. Perhaps I'll keep it ambiguous.
Ooh. There's an event in Michigan in June.
Well, I'll always keep my options open, but I've definitely got a busy schedule
Is
this
that the
year.
Big Clouds event?
No, I'm
I
not.
know there's a I know
Yeah,
there's a
I know
event
of.
in Michigan too.
Yeah, Big Clouds is another event. It's a big event to
I'll
run,
be
but
at
I'm
that
talking
one. I'll
about.
be judging that event.
Mm, cool. That one's I think in the southern part of the state. I was talking about gems and genetics. I'll be the first time vending for the Trichome Forge there with my buddy Baked Pone at the
Oh, that's
Gems and
cool.
Genetics event. Yeah.
I'm happy to do that because I've heard only good things about the Gems and Genetics event from basically everybody who's gone. A lot of really cool people go. There's really good breeders there. If you're into the gem side of things, there's lots of cool stuff being traded around for seemingly fair prices and lots of cool varieties. Just from the videos I've seen of people walking through, seems like it's a good time, good people, and
Yeah, they
fun
got
event.
good bands. They had Mendo Dope this year coming out, so that's gonna be
They
dope.
got crystals. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, there's vendors
Crystals.
that'll have crystals and there's also this year there's like a whole booth or a tent set up for like healing. So there'll be like yoga and a bunch of different things. So it's got something for everybody. It's a camping event too, 3-day event. So I mean you can buy single day tickets, but also there's the option to camp. I think it's gonna be cool.
Cool.
Multi-day can be fun for sure. The last day it's usually a little bit you're like tired and it can be
Yeah.
like, oh, I've been doing event stuff all weekend, but at the same time, it's worth seeing all the different cool things. Like Mendo Dope is one I would 100% want to see live eventually someday. I've loved the videos of the live performances I see look like it's a great time, and I listen to their music pretty often, so big fan of their stuff, and seems like worth going to for sure to catch them. Michigan's got a lot of really good events. I want to go for Hash Bash. The event, like the protest, not the cup. But
Yeah.
no
You just
offense to the
missed out
cup.
on that one.
I want to go. I know that's I always say next year. I always say next year, but I'm fucking. It's tough, man. Travel is so expensive, and getting from California to Michigan is not like a
Well, Hash
one
Bash is
flight.
one that's a static. It's always the first Saturday of every April. So at least you can plan for it if you
I know
want.
when it is. It's just
Okay,
getting
okay.
there. It's the getting there. I want to be there for sure because it's one that I've like watched from afar. Like even when I was in Ohio, I knew about Hash Bash like before I moved to California, and like Michigan was always the slightly green, mitten on the way over.
Yeah.
In Ohio, we were so fucking hard red. And you guys had medical way before Ohio did, and so there was good weed coming from Michigan from when I was younger, and it was available, and I was very happy that it wasn't just Mexican brick and beasters from Canada. So that was a great time when the medical market opened up there. But even before that, like I knew a guy, dated his younger sister, and he would drive out to California with a van and pick up like 10 pounds at a time and just come back and like sell it off ounces and pounds at a time. And that was like his whole entire way that he paid for his little place in a really cool area of the Cleveland area. So uh, I was thankful to have that plug because California herb for a
Absolutely,
Midwest
man.
boy, oh my God. It was like life changing. Like when the bud is so good and you're used to like nothing or garbage.
It's like dispo bud or homegrown.
Honestly, it's like that. Like when you get a good grown batch or like small batch for the first time, where it's like it smells outrageous, it gives you a really crazy effect and flavors and just experiences that you probably aren't getting in other plants or drugs, even because a lot of people are attracted to this one for a particular reason. And I'm curious if Matthew Gates did anything exciting for 420 this year.
Me myself, I went on a hike basically, and yeah, I actually, like I was saying earlier, I scored some really great stuff from the free seed day, and so I had a little bit of that spritzer or whatever they called it. That was a cultivar allegedly, and it was pretty good, to be honest. So that was nice. I also had some of that suds that I had talked about earlier from the Living Soil Summit. That's probably some of the best melt that I've had in a long time, to be honest. So yeah, so kind of chilled out for the most part after that hike.
Sounds like everybody had a pretty, you know, slightly uneventful in a good way, just laid back,
One
mellow,
other thing
happy,
I wanted to bring
easygoing.
up. I had one other thing on 420. I spent it with my good buddy, my best friend there, Big Pone, and we were trimming. So most of our harvest over there goes to concentrate, right? But it goes fresh frozen. But we do take like out of our choice phenos because they're just all been pheno hunts so far. Out of our choice phenos, we're just taking, a good foot out of the cola, so a cola down. about a foot, chunks out, so that we can dry that as flour and test it as flour too and see what it's like, so we can make our determination. And so I was over there and we were trimming up some of that, just these tops. It's usually pretty quick trimming. And I don't know, we went through about 6 or 7 phenos of different strains. And I'm looking at it all as I'm trimming it. I had just one of these weird moments where you kind of sit back and reflect on just, I guess, your life or whatever. I'm looking at the weed and it all looks like stellar, like if it was in a dispo, it would be like, top shelf shit, right? And I'm not just tooting my own horn. I mean, Baked is a good fucking grower over there and he's doing 90% of the work. And so I'm looking at it and it's really like out of all the like those 9 different phenos, there was like 2 that even interested us in any way. But like when you looked at it, it was like would be like people would be super happy to have it. And it just blows me away, like the progression of it all, going back from like dirt weed would get you high if you smoked enough of it. And now I'm looking at this shit and sticking my nose up at it, and it's fucking would be stellar to me, you know what I mean? So I don't know, it sounds like it's boastful, but it's just like it's good to be able to look back and know that you're progressing as a grower. You know what I
Oh
mean?
yeah. 10, 20 years. I mean, like how far you go back, it would be unidentifiable what we're smoking now in like a good way. And even like you were saying, sticking your nose up at some stuff. He's in the chat and he's one of the people who shouted him out. But Buddy Kilowatt is a local here, San Diego. And he said we got a sesh sometimes. I agree. He's hitting some local spots near me for some surfing, and we'll link up, buddy. But somebody I heard him hyping on maybe like a wormhole a while back was this, and you know, I'm honest. I'll tell you what I actually think about brands. He was saying there's this group called Terp Mansion, and I don't know if he's actually gotten to smoke their stuff or like seen it in person, but he was just commenting on, and I follow them on Instagram. They have a pretty good looking page, lots of nice greenhouses that seem real well dialed in. They're running modern hype kind of strains that look really nice for the gram. Well, I walked around at this Hall of Flowers and I saw a Terp Mansion booth, and I was like, oh, cool. And I also saw like a few pounds of bud, and this goes to the whole sticking your nose up at shit because they're like sitting in a turkey bag out on the table, which back in the old school days, like the medical days, that was kind of how it was just a standard. You had a turkey bag, you'd walk up and smell people's butt. So I'm not like sticking my nose up at that. I got my face down in that turkey bag and I gave a nice big whiff and I could barely fucking smell a goddamn thing. And I was just like, how are you gonna call yourself Terp Mansion if I have to get my face all up? It's close enough that I'm worried about getting my mustache hairs and beard hairs, and I still can hardly even smell the shit. Like the type of stuff that you got to
Um,
break up for it to start having a little bit of smell to come out of
I
it.
I will admit to you if you're sitting in a if you're sitting there with a turkey bag, yeah, I'm gonna walk right past. I'm sorry, I just do. I'm not gonna. I'm like, no, you don't give you don't give a fuck.
I prefer a sea vault or a glass jar. I'll just be
Yeah, exactly.
honest about that.
Put it in some
But
give
but I don't hold
give
my
it a
nose up
little
to a
bit.
turkey bag. I've seen
I
some
Oh,
do.
great fucking weed in turkey bags, like some of the
So
so
have
best shit I've
I,
I,
but
ever
it's like,
seen.
but how much terps are gonna be left in the thing if you got a whole big fucking turkey bag open all day?
I was
I know
just gonna
somebody who
tell
has
a
like
story.
anti-static turkey bags that like don't cling the trichomes apparently, but I don't know how well those actually work out. I saw Noah the grow on mute a couple times over there, so I really want to hear what he had to say.
Uh,
I was gonna say Terp Bless Master. I just had a little joke.
Oh man, you're right though.
so
That really was the
yeah,
case.
like I don't know how old everyone is, but when there was a time when you were lucky to get a good bag of weed. I mean, it was hard to find.
Amen.
So when I started getting good weed, that was it. Like once basically what happened was I realized that if you take out all the seeds from the regular weed and weigh it, you get half of the weed. And if you pay double for the non-seeded good shit, you end up with the same amount of smokable weed. So that I always went for the good weed if I could get it. But there was a time when you couldn't get it. So eventually I went and got like regs. But some of those regs, dudes, would get you fucking high as a kite, man. And there was no terps on the shit, but it'd still get you high as a kite. That's all I was going to mention. But
It's probably
yeah,
just the
it is
pesticides on it, man.
amazing.
That's
Or
all.
tolerance. Your tolerance was so shit.
It's
If you were like looking for
That's
a
true
bag
too.
that
Tolerance, right?
smelled shitty and like you hadn't smoked because like weed was like hard to come by.
To
Like
come
you
by
couldn't
it.
even
If it
get
was a
good stuff.
day, right? It doesn't
Yeah, you
matter,
wanted
right?
some You're like, oh, I'll take the regs because it's what you got. You got weed, I'll
Right.
fucking
You
take
got
it.
what you get.
I'll pick
And
the seeds out and I'll smoke it. I'll be fine. And you're right. Like Brandon has mentioned many times in the past, even like the hardcore brick, like some of that shit was like psychedelic, and maybe it was pesticides or fucking paraquat or God knows what.
or
But
fermented prop
I
or
tend to
something.
want to
Yeah.
believe, yeah, maybe it was a fermentation process,
Who
but I do
knows?
think there was some. Breeder Steve has been around for a long time, and he's been to a lot of these producing countries, and he speaks fondly of the early and even current Mexican cultivation and how some of the best stuff is grown in Mexico. They have people that really know what they're doing. They have great selections. They've got several cities that have notoriously kept strains for a long time and
Dude,
cultivated them really well.
I saw a documentary. I don't know if it was just on weed or Colombia, but they showed a patch that was growing in Colombia, and the things had like literally football sized chunks on the plants, dude. I was like, holy shit. And yeah, the transport and all that is what, deteriorated. Probably some of it was really good before it started its way to America or wherever it was going. And they crush it and it gets buried. And like, yeah, we were talking about the dirt weed. We thought it was because like when they piled it up on the ground when they were harvesting it, the stuff that was closest to the earth like made the dirt taste, the earth taste of the weed. And I'm sure some of that was, probably true. Who the hell knows? I don't know, but yeah, it is amazing how what marijuana. If you got a sample from 1960, and if we went back in time and brought him a sample of that Spartan was trimming that on 420, like they'd be blown out. I'm sure, blown away, blown out of their brains of what they're looking at.
I think a lot of them wouldn't like it. I've been noticing there's a trend of people that either stopped smoking for one reason or another. They got injured, they got sick, or had like a paranoid episode. So they left weed for a little while and they came back after years or months, and their tolerance is completely shot. And now they're trying to smoke modern shit that's twice as strong in some cases in terms of THC percentage, which is really just like the raw kind of anxiety provoking power end of psychedelic side of the experience for a lot of people. Or if there's even a little bit of THCV in there, there's uncomfortable factors if you're not tolerant to getting high, so that feeling can make people paranoid, especially with like edibles. You see there's that famous video where these cops like confiscated some brownies and they called the cops on themselves because they thought that they were dead. And it was an interesting video, but it just shows you like, anybody can get way too fucked up and be very paranoid or like think that shit's happening that's not. And yeah, I think the potency thing from back then versus now, I do think a lot of it comes down to our tolerance. Almost all of us have access to it pretty freely and we can use every day if we so choose. Many of us don't necessarily use like that, but for those who do, I think we can all admit our tolerance is probably higher in 2024 than it was in 2014, than it was in 1994, and going back as far as when you first started smoking that first time, you actually got high. Like some people smoke for the first time and didn't get high because they didn't even know how to inhale. So it's like, but then when they finally got it to like get into their system, whether it was a brownie or somebody shotgunned or something like that, where it went down into your lungs and you fucking coughed and you felt that like fucking rush and experience, it's sort of undeniable. And it's just what quality of product will get you there. And I certainly believe in writing the 50 Strains books, have come across the vast variety of experiences. So I still like to uh, search around and pheno hunt like Spartan or highlight those for people because a lot of the sort of industry still believes that or asks for what's the highest THC or give me your best indica or sativa. Like people are starting to now just ask for terpenes. Like, oh, I like ones that smell more like lemon or lime and things like that. Or asking, like, I want limonene or terpinolene, or I want something that's more heavy sedating and, it's going to have linalool or myrcene or something like that. And you're starting to see some more. It's a slow trickle. It's like a very slow trickle, but it's getting out there. And I think the more it does, I think it just takes a few big products to kind of hit that kind of put it in people's face. Like I don't care about skin care product, but there's this fucking hyaluronic acid or something that's in all of the new beauty anti-aging serums, right? And that's like it comes on the commercials. I don't look for it, but it just pops up. Like maybe it's my wife or whatever. We're watching TV, they're advertising to her or whatever, but it's now across everything from the budget brand to the $200+ or whatever brand. They're all pumping that one thing. And so the education gets out there that people know to ask for that particular chemical or whatever it is.
Speaking of which, Dr. Sinclair, who is looking into longevity and that kind of stuff, famous for talking about exposure, among other things, exposures to like extreme heat, extreme cold, like with ice baths, right? And resveratrol was another thing that he said would be good for longevity, but I guess he's in trouble now because people weren't able to replicate the results at first because of like contextual stuff supposedly, but now more and more people have come out and found that like resveratrol doesn't really do very much, it seems like, or what it was said to do at least. And yeah, so like even the people who ostensibly, are doing this for good reasons and don't have a lot of connections and things to like businesses or whatever, to like hawk a product, so to speak. It seems like even them, even that can be really hard in the like the haze of trying to figure out how various chemistries and things work for something so subtle. You know what I mean? Like, and you can't tell until it happens with regards to longevity, right? So,
Well, and the nobler
um,
the cause, the
yeah,
more genuine their heart might be in so researching it. But in the efforts of doing something, maybe they think that they're onto something, and then the ego that comes along with like, oh, maybe I'll be a Nobel laureate,
once you get to a
or
certain level of status, it's almost like, yeah, I mean, egoic or not, like, you probably have some confidence, because other people are agreeing with you, and lots of research funding is coming in, so there
that's the other
could
thing
be
is
incentives
there's
that happen afterwards too. Yeah,
you have
for
more than
sure.
just your own like reputation riding on it. There's other people's investment and time and efforts and
100%.
energy. So you might even know that this shit isn't going to work out, but it's like too difficult for you to tell the people or reveal it. And maybe there was some early data, or you just got encouraged to cherry pick by somebody who was the one who was dangling that cash in front of you. Oh, you want to keep that lab running, right? I'll give you another investment if you keep telling people that XYZ, because it might not be their product, but the person who's paying them to do the research. And that's why the funding is always important. But you're saying even in this case, it didn't seem like the funding was necessarily an issue. It just was like I'd almost say like misguided intent, or they misinformed themselves with a positive intention. They were looking for something so hard that they found it, but it didn't end up having a verifiable kind of a repeatable experience.
I mean, it was somewhat convincing in the beginning, but I think part of it also is that like in the span of his career, technology has gotten a lot better for finding these kinds of things and for honing in like a hypothesis about physiological ramifications. So in like 15 to 20 years, you might find that what looked contextually compelling suddenly is less so, especially if other people weren't able to find the same thing as you. And then, but meanwhile, now it's like 15 years in, and how much money has been spent on like resveratrol based like medicines and gummies and therapies. Whereas people did seem to report like benefits, right? So obviously, to get to this point, people did seem to feel
Well,
like
there's
it was
always the
working.
placebo. There's always the placebo effect, but I think
Well, you control for that, though. I mean, Dr.
well,
Sinclair
I'm saying
knew how
people that are
to.
reporting, people that are another important point, self-reporting, positive results. I think that some of that could be placebo still. I don't know.
Well,
I
yeah, sure.
just
When it comes to like feelings, yeah.
Even
yeah,
within the drug trial, because like if you're being given a drug, there's a sort of placebo effect that like you think that the drug's going to work, and maybe the drug is neutral, but you're getting some amount of placebo effect within the active control study.
but I think it highlights
Yeah,
a great point though. It's like how do you translate that to a garden? And that's like when there's a if you're considering a change in your garden, even if you have white paper science behind it saying that it's going to be a beneficial thing, don't change your whole garden over in one big thing. Just maybe put one plant aside and give it its own go with whatever this new thing is and see if you see a result and see if it's worth investing to do the whole grow or not. I think you have to at least put it in your environment and still do the work of, is this going to work like they say it's going to work? You don't just blindly trust something. I do think that's a good takeaway from that.
I think it's a lot like the like what we talk about with regards to um photosynthetically active radiation, right? Or things that are close to it, and like that those conversations about like, oh well, yeah, well maybe technically some of these other spectra of light are also maybe photosynthetically active, or at the very least biologically active, right? So they have other physiological effects. And but like
Like
basing, but you
like
know,
the
you
Emerson
wouldn't
effect, for
necessarily,
example, is a perfect example of what you're talking about.
sure, but you wouldn't necessarily base your growing on that, right? You wouldn't be
Right,
like,
right.
oh well, this this biologically active
This helps, so
radiation
we're
is
going to get
really
rid
gonna
of
like
the
change so much. Yeah, right,
we're only going to
exactly.
use that and not white light, even though it's just like a tiny percent, because it has activity
Or we're
doesn't
gonna
mean it's
include it
the
and it's
main
gonna we're gonna
focus.
spend so much money to add the way to do that, and it's just not worth it. You know, the juice isn't worth the squeeze, so to speak. And I think that's very similar to this sort of situation where maybe even perhaps we'll find somebody who overturns again and goes, actually resveratrol is helpful, but only this much, and how much does it really help? You know what I'm
I
saying? So
I always have
as
to
a
think
as
like
an example.
what's the goal? In that case, it's like a longevity thing.
Exactly.
And like with longevity, there's interesting sort of conundrum. Like you could make somebody live to be, let's say 200, something that's not been done yet, right? But if they're blind, they're deaf, and they're unable to move around, it's not a great quality of life. So you have to get them to be 200 while taking care of their vision, hearing, and all these other things, and at the same time trying to overcome like Alzheimer's and other psychological ailments that start to uh, riddle people, even if their physical body is in good shape, keeping the mind healthy past a certain age. So it makes me wonder, well, like, what is the goal? And sometimes even with like gardening, when we see new studies and things like that, like, what is the goal? Like, are you just trying to maximize yields? Do you want to consider chemotypes and terpenes that are being produced as well? Because I think the ultimate end goal for a lot of people is to have a good consumable product, but a lot of businesses think like, what's the highest THC thing that I can grow because that's what's selling in the market right now, which I think is a little bit short-sighted because if shows like ours and others do their job and get the education out there and, in some capacity inform the market through, Joe tells Susie and Susie tells Bob and so on, everybody starts to realize like, oh, I'm smoking this stuff and it's got a kind of floral like lavender. There's some linalool in there and that's soothing. It's relaxing. I'm gonna smoke that at night. I smoked that right before bed and I slept amazing. I'm gonna go back to that one, the lavender. Oh, that was bomb. And like the more and more people get to know that, the more you know, uh, I think we'll have a true understanding that the medicine of cannabis can be powerful in more than one way. I think a lot of people underutilize its extremely, I heard it referred to as a dirty drug before in the past because it can treat so many things. But I think that is a, sometimes they say like that's a feature, not a bug when they're talking about programming. And in my opinion, in cannabis, like that's a feature of cannabis that it's a dirty drug, not a bug. Being like to explain that, I guess it's a good thing. It's something that's built in on purpose. It helps so many different things. That's a great part of it. That's part of its core, not a bug or an issue that needs fixing. Um, I guess some people would want a drug that's more specific, like this is only going to affect your heart pressure or your vision or something else, but it has the ability to impact so many different parts of your body. Some would argue pretty much every system it's got a little bit of its fingers going into. So it's an interesting one for sure. And with the whole like goals, um, what direction do people want to take it? Like THC, I think is going to be, we're going to realize, okay, somewhere between 10 and 40%, probably like 10 and 30% actually. And then what else in there do you want in that basket? What part of that bouquet strikes your fancy? Because even fairly inexperienced people, a lot of them will say like, I know which one I like based on the smell or based on the taste or the high. So like they might still be saying, oh, I want the highest THC, but then they'll like within that highest THC pick the one that smells best to them. And so I think there's some intuitive nature to the way that the market's beginning to understand cannabis, but from the growing side of thing, I don't know which direction to necessarily take this. I know Matthew has some science and stuff to bring up, but I'm curious if anybody else on the panel, because I've been jibber jabbing, has any ideas about, goals, whether it's this longevity type of thing or with like cannabis when you see a study and it presents multiple things like what do you actually care about in the end and how do you apply it in your garden?
Well, you'd mentioned the cannabinoid stuff or cannabis stuff for like longevity, I think, or at least you combine those two things in that sentence. Maybe I misheard, but I feel like just on that note, I'm very excited about. It is true that like you have a bunch of CB1 and 2 receptors and others that will interact with cannabinoids, and so it can be kind of hard to like kind of sort of appreciate because also you're going to have like different amounts and different reactions biologically individual to individual, right? So but like getting a feeling for like how that can be helpful with like reduction in actually Iceni, however you pronounce it in chat, I was talking about resveratrol being like a blocker for stress, and so and making I think the fair point that in some ways it's like you want the butterfly to have to struggle out of the chrysalis, otherwise the wings don't pump with fluid and you don't get wings, and then the butterfly is not successful, so to speak. And that's also true for eustress, like we talked about, right, versus distress, like you brought up, Jack. And I think that cannabinoids and other products can be used in that way where where you're blocking the distress and you're not blocking the eustress responses, or at least you're trying to and even like psychologically, just trying to relax yourself too. It can be very palliative and resilient. It keeps you resilient, like stretching, I think, with your tendons, something that I recently have become a lot more familiar with, actually, unfortunately.
Good for you, man. I just taught a 2 hour yoga class and I really see the benefit in it. And there's some people out here that like break the stereotypes of like old people not being able to move well. Because you see like 70, 80, 90, maybe even 100-year-old people out here that can like still touch their toes, are still walking several miles, like sometimes running. Like you look at them, they're
Oh,
in
I
like
know,
fucking
yeah.
yoga pants, like running or like power walking up the boardwalk or whatever, tan, healthy as shit. I'm just like, where I'm from, that's very, very rare to see somebody at that age like doing that fucking
I
well.
I was
And
just
here it's
I was
pretty
just
common.
talking I was just talking about this with a friend of mine. Like, sometimes you see like it's going to be a funny example, like military generals, right? Like some of these people they get a little bit, fat, even in the American military. And other if you look at other militaries, it can be a lot more rotund. But like some of those people though, especially like people like 82nd Airborne or those groups that are supposed to be highly mobile, you get up in those like 50s, 60s, and those people are still doing PT. Like you look at them, it's like, yeah, you definitely didn't take the desk job afterwards to heart, and you definitely kept. And so, like, there, and not everyone. Some people get injured, some people leave, whatever, and some people aren't as active as others. But you can see it, like it's possible. There's people out there who've been like doing it their whole lives, keeping like at a high degree of physical fitness, and it definitely changes. You don't have to grow old, so to speak. And I think that's very similar to the longevity theme, like you were just talking about.
There's a great documentary called Cuba and the Cameraman. I'd recommend to anybody to watch. It's just about this cameraman who goes to Cuba like every 10 years and it's like through time and there's crazy shit happening during that era, but he visits these farmers and it's like three brothers that just live on a farm and it's like basically like how communism affects them. Like, they lose cattle and they're like fighting over their land, this and that. But like the main thing that I took away from it was like that he was 50 when they started and then it was like 60 and then 70. And like this dude was still like fit and like moving because he was still working in the fields. They had pretty basic equipment and he was still just like yoked. I'm like, holy shit. Like if you just keep doing it, like you just kind of, not that you don't ever grow old, like eventually time's going to get all of us, but some people hang on a whole lot longer. So that's a beautiful thing to take away. And I think cannabis actually helps with that. I'm happy to see a lot of the sports and physical, you know, um, like hiking, biking, swimming, tennis, all that stuff starting to become more open and accepting to using cannabis as a medicine for treatment, rest and recovery, and things like that. So positive changes in those directions for sure. But I'm curious if maybe Spartan Grown has any thoughts or ideas on the conversation that we've been having so far.
What was the conversation we've been having so far?
We're
Because
we're bouncing around a bit, but I was just
I
we were
got
talking
two.
about
Wait, before we go for out, I want to defend myself a little bit. For one, before we started this conversation, I popped out Spartacus and fucking did a whole bowl of trim tray hash because I just finished trimming one of my
Yes.
plants, and that has completely blown my mind. But and then two, um, Smart Poker was saying in chat. about how he suffered from inflammation. I was instantly drawn to that conversation and wanted to know if he'd ever tried to take a high CBD strain and make a concentrate like RSO out of it and try that for inflammation because most of the studies that I've seen with inflammation specifically in CBD is that there are these freaking high doses of CBD. It's not 100 milligrams or anything like
Yeah.
that.
It's like 60 mgs per kilogram or something.
Yeah, so I would try like high doses of, and it's CBD, so you don't really have a huge risk of. I mean, there depends on how you grow it and if there's, how what trace amounts of THC are in it, but you're not probably going to feel very much from it. So yeah, try some high doses of CBD.
I would agree with that. I just want to corroborate what you're saying is that me personally, I don't really feel like a head change even at like high doses like the kind you're supposed to have for like therapeutic effective CBD like Spartan is saying.
We're talking like thousands, right? Like of like because you were
Yeah, I
saying
get
60
yes.
milligrams per
Hundreds, many
kilogram,
hundreds.
and if you weigh, I don't know, American might weigh 100 kilograms, 220 pounds, which would be 6,000 or 600. That'd be 6,000. That'd be a 6,000
Yeah,
milligram CBD dose
in
if you
some
weighed
cases,
220
yeah.
pounds, which is, I just talked to a guy last night who weighs more than that, and that was like his ideal weight. So there's definitely people who are going to be taking 6,000 milligrams potentially of CBD per day for a therapeutic dose.
Yeah. They don't
Yeah, I
even
mean,
make doses like that in dispensaries, do they?
no, not
I don't
usually.
think
Check,
so, no.
Yeah,
but I
that's
mean,
like
this
that's the
is the cheap
problem.
home grow, guys. This is the cheap home grow.
You gotta make
Check
your
your
own.
state. There are a lot of states have hemp programs. A lot of states have
Yes.
hemp programs. And they're not, I know in Michigan, that's really cheap. It's really cheap. So, I mean, you can do this for yourself. If you, I mean, well, it does require land. I guess I understand that. So that's a
Even
big,
if you can't grow it, go to happybudshemp.com. It's
they're
tested.
out, Jack. They've been out for a while.
Oh, okay. Well, then
Oh
there's other places
no.
to source. There's a I can fucking find their thing. I've referenced them a few times on the show, but there's a lot of people that do bulk CBD. You can get
Yeah.
concentrate from like powders. You can get hemp. You can get distillate, isolate. There's a whole variety. The hemp market, don't pay out the nose. If you're feeling like you're paying too much, then try and get in contact with me or somebody else because I just don't have the person on top of my head. There's a really good guy in our community who puts some stuff out there. They gave a bunch of free hemp seeds away for years, and they probably still are doing that. So I gave those seeds away to somebody to grow their own hemp or CBD. And so it's not my side of the medicine, but I'm happy that it works for a lot of people. And I guess to kind of narrow the focus of the conversation, because we had jumped around a bit, we are talking a bit about like longevity in life generally as it relates to the study Matthew was talking about, but also just as it potentially relates to cannabis. And then how do you apply studies generally that we come across to your garden or life? And I think you've spoken a little bit to that, but just to kind of get us narrowed back in.
Was that for me? What'd you
Or
say?
Spartan,
Okay, okay.
I completely missed it then. What was, you're gonna have to hit it
your
back
thoughts
there. I
on
apologize.
Some good
longevity,
trim tray ass, dude.
that trim
Yeah,
trade
man,
hashes hit.
it's got me
But
Look at
in.
them.
how longevity relates to cannabis, and then how you generally apply studies about cannabis, whether growing or how it impacts us medically to your own life.
Like longevity in what way? Like, are you talking about longevity of the plant or
Do you have any
longevity?
thoughts on it as it relates to cannabis? Do you think that cannabis promotes longevity, decreases, or has a neutral effect?
No, I think cannabis increases longevity, and then and it's kind of the numbers kind of show that, like the body mass indexes tend to be in a more healthier range of people that consume cannabis, and they tend to. Well, I think I think I can't say that they have less hospital visits because it's not among all diseases. I think there's two or three where we actually go more. So, but it's a good mix. I'll take the mix from what I've seen, and so all of those things, and I think just the general reduction of stress, which is just an all around helpful benefit for health. I think so for all those reasons, and then when you throw in growing the damn thing, that's a whole mental health thing right there. That's almost like mental health of like what I felt like when I was working out a lot, that kind of stuff. So I think all in all, it's a well-rounded increase in happiness and health. And yeah, I stand behind that for sure.
I think that the like what are viewed as like the cannabis people in society who truly stand behind it, like the Willie Nelsons, like when people tell a story, it's like, oh, he smokes so much that it's hard to keep up with him. Or Snoop Dogg, who has like a paid roller on his staff, who I think makes like, however many thousands of dollars per year to roll him like his 80 blunts a day or whatever it is. And when you look at them, Snoop's not a spring chicken. He's an older individual, and he's still, like you said, on the BMI. I would guarantee you he'd probably be close to like underweight or healthy weight. He's a very slim, trim guy. Joe Rogan's another one who's been long-term cannabis advocate, heavy user, fit, very into weightlifting. Uh, Tommy Chong, older, but he's still in relatively good health. He did get cancer, which a lot of people point out, but that was when he was in prison for having his son sell a bong, and he went down for his son selling a bong to a state that didn't allow paraphernalia so that his son wouldn't have to do any jail time and none of his family would. That was the deal. While he was there, he couldn't use cannabis and he ended up getting cancer, like many did in that prison and many others, because they're often in nasty places that have lots of fucked up shit, chemicals and, waste facilities and things like that. So, why he got cancer is who knows, but he no longer has it, and he still promotes, his little CBD products, and can still smoke. I fucking met him a few years ago, and he smoked for 3.5 hours with us, smoking a bunch of joints. So anybody who tells you he's not smoking anymore, they're full of shit. You might have seen some ad or whatever, but yeah, I can personally vouch for the fact that Tommy Chong, at his age, can still, put down joints for several hours and hold shop. Like, great conversation. He's just the person that, if you've seen him on the podcasts or online or interviews, he's a very down to earth, humble individual. So very awesome person. But he's one of those advocates, I think, that shows the longevity in cannabis is possible. Like Eagle Gardens is another great example. I think he's in his 50s. He's a grandfather. He's out there running now. He's got Run Eagle Run. And he's like, I just saw that got like 11th place out of like 190 people or something in one of his races. And it's just like amazing to see people taking care of their health and wellness, and using this plant that for so long was looked at as like the lazy stoner kind of thing and maybe unhealthy, like all this past studies used to look at just the negative effects potentially, and coming into the world now where we're seeing like lots of athletes use it, just not in our little space, but like on the global stage. We're starting to see more and more like NBA, NFL, etc. athletes. Like Run Ricky Run was a pretty big deal. I know Ricky Williams in the NFL. For those who aren't familiar, there was an interesting documentary and about his journeys with like anxiety going through the NFL and doing all the interviews and things like that, how it helped him and his recovery and pain and things like that. So there's a lot of deep stories in that and great positive learning, I think, that is going on in modern times in the public domain that maybe was hidden behind closed doors for a long time, because you find out about like, oh, this celebrity or that celebrity is like a big cannabis user or fan, but many times they just don't talk about it because they didn't want it to like ruin their career or become the thing. Like they're not like a Willie Nelson, right? Or they don't want to become that thing because they want to be able to play the family friendly venues or whatever, or get the bigger commercial checks and things like that. So yeah, that's a more Jack rambling on longevity, but curious if the American one just unmuted over there, if you've got any
Yeah,
thoughts on the
my
matter with
edibles.
aging in
Hey, I think
reverse.
you're right. But I'll tell you this: this is what I think is a problem with people and the thought of medical marijuana. If you're just smoking joints all day long, it's medical to an extent, but like we were talking about the CBD, you need thousands of milligrams to make it truly work. Same thing, I believe personally with THC. If you really want it to be like truly therapeutic to a real serious condition, you need that RSO, and you need to like be incapacitated or build a tolerance. You know what I'm saying? That's why people who smoke weed all the time could still get cancer. And you know what I mean? Yeah. I've been taking the RSO and edibles now daily. And the other thing I was going to say is, unfortunately, I since it does work so well, when I run out, I start to fall apart after like a week. You know what I'm saying? Like I tell
You feel
like,
like shit. You're in pain.
well, yeah, you're doing work. Let's say you bang your knee right one day at work. You take the edibles or and a little pinch of RSO, go to sleep. The next morning, you wake up ready to rock and roll. You don't got the
That's kind
RSO or
of,
the edibles. You bang your
yeah.
knee. The next day, it's lingering. It's there. You feel it, and it starts to build up. All these little nicks and hits don't go away. For me
Skillbo calls
personally,
himself the
anyway.
Tin Man. He's like, he needs his oil, to lubricate all the
Yeah,
joints and things
dude.
like
It's
that.
it,
And he
and
makes
I
that
believe it
rollerball shit, and
100%,
it's
dude.
real good
When
stuff.
I'm flush with edibles, I am ready to take on the world. When
Chipper
I am,
attitude, feeling
But
good
I'm
with no
yeah,
pain.
curious.
when I run out, it's a little
I
different.
agree with that actually, Tao, and I think that's what I was trying to get at before. right, is that like it can
Hmm.
be kind of this palliative thing that's this balm of resilience, right?
Yeah,
Not necessarily as a topical, but like as
right. But
RSO whatever. But
yep.
what do you think about what like people like I seen he was saying in the chat and stuff, that do you think that like
I
do you
didn't
think
read
that
all
there
but the
might be like a
smoking
too
part.
much, or not even a too much, but like a like I'm sure there's situations where maybe you don't want to do that as much. But
Yes,
that's really
I had a discussion with someone, and like it's a good and a bad thing because, like, yeah, if you do run out, then you got a problem, when your body's all accustomed to it, and they get to the
I
point
think
where
so.
you just take so much that like you can't keep taking that much. They were getting sick to their stomach and stuff on the RSO anyway. So yeah, there's definitely
It's
intricacies
strong
with it.
medicine.
There's
Yeah,
limits, but also I think what you're describing is a dependency, and like we wouldn't
right,
shame somebody if they were dependent on, say, insulin if they were diabetic. So I
right.
think the
It's a
problem is
different
the
thing.
cost of the
Mhm.
drug, the availability of it, the regulation of it. If we were able to get RSO down to $32 a month, where it was a $1 a day dosage for somebody to get a gram a day or something like
Right.
that, then I think we would be in a position where you'd have responsible dosing available for people that needed it. And I mean, myself, Spartan, and many others have probably seen the benefits it's had to cancer in particular, but many other ailments. And I wish we could get to the point where it was sort of hands off enough that we could get that cost down to $1 per gram of RSO, or whatever that daily dosage is for somebody. So it's not the when we talk about dependence, a lot of people want to be like, oh, because cannabis was regulated as an illicit drug for a while, get into the addiction conversation. And like, oh, you're addicted because you need it. And the second that you don't have it, you're feeling like shit. That's because you're fucking addicted to it. You're hooked on it. You're dependent. But there's a difference between addiction and dependence. I'm a fan of
Yeah.
Dr. Carl Hart has some good work on this, but I think like the three main things with addiction are like you want to quit, but you can't is like the number one thing, which most people with cannabis, that's like typically not the case. Two is like you can't hold down personal relationships or a job because of that substance. Three is typically you resort to crime, whether it's like robbing, stealing, selling that drug, or like pawning off all of your personal possessions to afford it. And there's not a lot of people with cannabis that fall into those buckets of addiction. So I think most cannabis users, I think, would fall under more of a dependent, and that harkens to the more medical side of things. It is called medical cannabis, and a lot of us treat it as a medicine, or we're using it in a role that is medicinal, whether it was
Yeah.
Yes, but
doctor prescribed or
consider
not.
I think that like for me, I wasn't really getting to that point because I wasn't making that argument. But I would ask you though, since you bring it up, like dependence. I think there's a difference between having a dependence because you have like chronic pain, right? And like not and like if you use a different alternative, you might become addicted, like you were just saying. And so you'd rather one over the other.
Physical.
But I think I was
Yeah.
mostly focusing on things like wound, like what Tao was saying, like if you have like work where you're like liable to get like cuts, scrapes, wounds, and even sometimes maybe a little bit of a deeper cut, potentially. If your body is constantly um, if you're constantly getting these cannabinoids and other products into the body, it could over a long period of time maybe have like an effect on how your body normally heals and that kind of stuff. And that might have for some people with certain genetic proclivities. I could see that being maybe not always useful, maybe, or maybe at least slightly detrimental. You know what I mean? Like, for example, how there's been opinions about the use of like neosporin or something like an antibacterial when you scrape your leg or something like that, or almost like using antibiotics, maybe more than you need to, or maybe overusing them, and in that kind of way. Do you know what I mean?
Well, and even like to the inflammation comment earlier, if we there's like muscle relaxers that will tackle inflammation. There's cannabis and other options. But like, let's say you use cannabis every single time that you have an inflammation type event. Inflammation is the body's natural way of repairing damage. So getting that inflamed, although it's uncomfortable and painful at times, there's a certain level that's healthy and required for our healing. And it also, I think, slowing us down limiting our mobility, our range of motion, and things like that around an injury. Like if you bust your knee or your elbow or your wrist or something like that, not being able to have that full range of motion protects the injury. That was what happened when I had an L5 vertebrae fracture and herniated disc and 3 bulging discs. I thought I had a pulled back muscle because that's what my trainer was telling me. I was in high school sports at the time. He said, "Oh, it's this pulled back muscle, ice, heat, stretch, you'll be fine." And so I played like a basketball season, track season, and eventually got to a doctor and realized I had like really fucked my back up. But the muscle healed or didn't heal, tightened around the injury to protect it. And had I uh, listened to my body and taken the time to realize like, oh, there's a reason your back's hurting so much. It's fucking hurt. Go see a doctor like sooner. I probably wouldn't have gotten the herniated disc. I probably would have said,
The
a few
doctors,
bulging discs.
did you just say the doctors said that though? The
It was
doctors
a
told you to,
trainer. It was a trainer, like a high
oh, trainer.
school,
Okay, sorry.
like a
Yeah, I was curious how that happened. Yeah, I would feel betrayed.
yeah, it was certainly a live and learn type situation. And it was also, I grew up in a culture of the Midwest that Brett Favre was like a person in my life that I was a big fan of. I was a Packer fan. He was the gridiron man. I
I
played
see.
quarterback. His whole thing was he never missed a start in a game. He'd always start the game, even if like he got knocked out in the fucking halftime or whatever and had to leave the game. The next week he'd come back and keep playing. And
Yeah,
so
he
my
was
thing
popping
was,
many pills though for a spell.
oh, and
Yeah,
he's beat up now. I've seen interviews of him. He like can barely string a sentence together. So I regret
he's
certainly
like kind of
all
like
the
Ozzy.
concussions I took, and I have arthritis in both hands because I broke every single finger playing football and basketball. So being tough has consequences. I live
Good
with
job, man.
them. The physical.
You know, I was gonna say about to the like the dependence thing and the addiction thing. Like, if someone doesn't get if they're addicted to heroin and they don't get that fix, the next day they're miserable. Like they can't even function. It's not like that. When I run out of edibles, it's just that I'm not, physically 100%. It's not like even. It's not even like quitting cigarettes where you get irritable. It's just that I'm not because I could still smoke. I'm still smoking.
But
But
some people
it's a
can't. Like if you cut it
physical.
completely
Yeah,
off, if you cut it completely
That's a good
off,
point.
there's a thing like
yeah.
there is technically cannabis withdrawal symptoms. Like people
I
will get
could. Yeah,
headaches,
there's
people can't
definitely.
sleep,
Yep.
people
Can't
sweat.
sleep. I could see
It's
that.
it's it's not as bad as like heroin or
Not
some
as
of the other.
pronounced.
Sure.
Yeah,
You're not going to
and
die
it's
like
sure
alcohol.
different
If you go cold
people.
turkey, you can die.
I know
Exactly,
somebody who
Tao.
died from going cold turkey. Yeah,
I think, yeah, I think some people, that's kind of the point I was trying to drive home before too. Yeah, because like I think that what I'm saying about like could there be negative effects? I think that almost
yeah.
assuredly in some contexts probably, and I think also to Tao's salient point, like different people will probably have different needs, and maybe as you age too, whether it's forwards or backwards, you're going to have different effects there too. So and I think you bring up a good point, Jack, that like for some people they might not even notice. Like for me personally, I don't seem to get um like hankerings for things like caffeine or nicotine or even cannabinoids for that matter. I don't typically go like, oh wow, like I really need to do like I'm really hankering for this, even though I've been exposed to all three of those things many times. But other people, I think it's a little bit different, and the way their body reacts can be different over a period of time. So
I
yeah,
certainly
that's a good
think
point.
some people have more addictive personalities and are more easily attached to certain substances. And some people, I think Buddy Kilowatt said, moderation is the key to life or everything in life. And he also said it's easier said than done. And I thought that was a great point because it's easy to say for sure. And it looks like Brandon just popped out. He said his reception is bad. And then shortly after that, his connection dropped. So cheers to Brandon Rust and Bokashi Earthworks. Always great to have him. Sorry earlier if the audio wasn't great. And he was on his phone, and before the show, it was coming through like pretty good. And then as soon as he came on the show, it got like 10x worse. So I was able to make out most of what he was saying, but if you couldn't, or if it wasn't the best quality, I apologize for that. But again, we have Noah the Growa's garden, a much chiller conversation, I think, leading into it this week. But that being said, Noah the Grow, why don't you tell us what we're looking at?
Well, you know what? I was actually just going to say something about that previous conversation, and I thought, what the heck? I'm already out here working and doing my stuff, so I'll just do what I'm doing, and I'll just show this off. But unfortunately, I had a very, very, very close someone very close to me. I'll just say that start at a very young age on antidepressant, on benzodiazepine, and I personally watched that eat them alive. As a young person, I watched it um, very, very closely. The person was they tried therapy, all this stuff, and it literally got to the point where at 16 years old, they caught him with over 300 Xanax bars in his school locker. And then I helped in the process of trying to get him off of that. He had multiple seizures and almost died. And we had to put him in a special, like he kept getting kicked out of like a actual drug rehab facilities because they couldn't handle it. And finally, we found a drug facility that you could medically taper him off it. So and they told me that he literally, if we hadn't done that, he would have died. They had to medically taper him. He had to do it for like 2 months at a crazy like facility in the middle of nowhere that was like $60,000. And anybody the Xanax specifically can kill you trying to come off it. So and this happened to a very close person to me at a very, very young age, and it was brutal to watch. I've never shared that on the show. I just figured I'd better throw that out there. And that's happened since I've known all you guys too, by the way. But yeah, brutal, brutal, brutal. Don't wish that on my worst enemy.
So important warning, benzos or benzodiazepines, Xanax and others, like we were mentioning earlier, there are certain drugs that have much steeper consequences than coming off of cannabis. So I didn't mean to, compare cannabis to all other drugs in that regard, but I am happy that we're having this discussion because it is an important one. And many have gone through
Totally.
that or similar battles with other substances. It could be alcohol too, it could be something that's legally sold over the counter at every gas station and liquor store, so the access of it, or like in that case, benzos are given from a doctor oftentimes. Maybe they're bought illicitly on the street later on, but if they're battling depression and things like that, oftentimes it's prescribed by their very own doctor. And I think that as somebody who's gone through some mental health issues in myself in the past, it's important to analyze the whole picture. I think when we look at a person, I think you have to realize like they're more than just the sum of their thoughts. They can go in and talk to a shrink or a psychiatrist or a psychologist, and they could talk to them, and that might make it better. It might make it worse. It helps a lot of people, and some people it doesn't. There's certain drugs that will help certain people, and cannabis is one of them. But not everything works for everybody. So it's important to acknowledge sometimes people need more, and there's no shame in that. If you do need support, then hopefully you can get it from a qualified place. The one thing I would advise anybody who is in that situation, because I've been there and gone through it, some of the things that help me, and this is like the last one's probably a seemingly impossible task, or like most people's life journey, but I think health, like we were talking about earlier, if you exercise and you're eating right, you don't necessarily see tons of people at the gym outwardly who seem depressed, and granted, their outward expression doesn't represent their inward life. But I know a lot of these people, and if you take care of yourself, you take care of your body takes care of you. You have a lot of happy hormones from the exercise. It feels good. You get endorphins from that rush. There's more than just the high of cannabis. Taking care of your body feels good. You get to see progression, how your body changes, whether it's just losing weight or gaining muscle or whatever it is for you, extending your lifespan so you can be there for your
Pumping
family,
that
friends,
blood,
kids.
clearing that cholesterol, talking over your friend, not realizing after the 300th or so episode that you're not supposed to do that. All of that.
Yeah, we gotta keep our bodies healthy so we can keep on doing it.
Your health is your most important asset, and believe me, you'll figure that out one way or the other. I agree with you. I've gone a complete transformation since I've been on the show myself. I've gone down I've had a lot of health issues myself, but yeah, and so I wasn't beating up the cannabis thing on that. As a matter of fact, that person, I helped get their medical card. They were given other antidepressants, and now they only take cannabis, and they're like, I mean, literally, it's like high dosage that they use that has helped combat them with their depression. And they were on Nutripolline. I can't even remember all the stuff. that I help them get off of. So it's and that's just an individual case, you know. And like you said, everybody has their own thing. I mean, everybody's mind. That's the thing when you're talking about something like an SSRI. That's like a super mind bending like drug that's like pretty brand new too. Like that's the other thing. Like they don't really have a lot of studies on it, and some of the studies that have been on it, you can find, let's like any study, you can find a great one, and believe me, I've seen the negatives.
Just read
And
the
just
black
not,
box warning. I mean, every
oh
single one
man,
of those drugs has a giant black box warning that
dude,
says that it
and
warning, if you take this, you might take your own life. There's a percentage of people
totally,
every single year who takes those. And then there's even worse, a percentage who go on to harm others because it dulls a lot of the emotional responses. And the part that I didn't get to in the second half of like on taking care of your health, like health is wealth for sure. Like no matter how much money you have, you if you're about to die tomorrow, you'd give all that money away to gain another year or 5 years if you could get that health issue cured. But the thing I think to get over a lot of the psychological stuff is people need to find purpose. As vague and general as that sounds, you need to have something in life that you're waking up and excited to do. It could be a friend, a family member, like a job or something in life that makes you happy, that you wake up excited for. Because if you don't have something like that, then you're I going to struggle to find general happiness. And if that's the opposite of depression and anxiety and those things, like being present, being happy, being in the moment, it's always usually when you're doing stuff that you love and finding those things and engaging them as much as you can. And obviously, like we'd all do that as much as we want, but we have to work. We have to do fucking things to pay the bills. That's why I encourage or try to encourage people to, the best time to look for a job is when you already have one. And if you've got a decent job, then you can start looking around for stuff that seems like you're going to get paid that much or better in a position. Like I know Spartan Grown took a pay cut actually to get into the cannabis industry. And that was something that I think he's probably, in retrospect, glad that he did, even though he's not currently there anymore for other reasons. But I'm curious if going to this whole point of purpose, do you think that reflecting back on it now, changing from a general industry job to a cannabis industry job was a choice that you are happy that you made, and how has your life kind of progressed and changed since that?
Yeah, I don't regret it at all. Each decision as I made it, I knew it was the right decision. It wasn't even a hard decision at the time for me. Each time, and like if faced with it again, I'd do it again, absolutely. And the reason I wanted to make that step into the commercial cannabis was I knew that I couldn't afford to do that on my own. Did I dream of it? Sure, that'd be cool to see my weed on a shelf somewhere and somebody buying it. Yeah, that'd be great. But I never had any aspirations of being huge. I like the craft, quality kind of it. I don't really like the idea. Well, I wasn't sure if I did. So the only way to do that was to see it with somebody else. So I found somebody else that I agreed with, the way they grew and the interview was more, well, it was pretty much 50-50, me interviewing them interviewing me. And I don't think I even turned in a resume or anything. It was funny. It was all handshakes and walking around and talking grow. But it was a good fit in. It was a great time, and I learned a lot. And I learned it was a lot more than what I'd want to do. I mean, I was loving it. I was getting paid well to do it. And then we ran into just moral differences, so I had to walk away. But I mean, I walked away with my head held high, and I don't have any animosity, and we're still friends, and we still talk. And my friends still work there, and all of that. So I'm wearing his gear right now as we speak on camera. His Mitten Canico. Shout out to Steve out there. And but
Clearly, we staged this plug an hour and 10 minutes into the
yeah,
show.
yeah, exactly. It's crazy how that just fell together. And yeah, so yeah, completely have no problems there. And it's just I've made more connections in the cannabis industry, and now I'm working for the hat I'm also wearing right now. I'm working for Grandmaster LEDs, so I'm still kind of an ancillary business, but I'm still working in the industry, still going, to grows and talking to growers and helping growers, which is fucking what I like to do anyway. That's why I do these shows. It all fits together, and it's like me following my dreams of what I want to do, what I like, and what rather than working in a factory slinging bread.
It's funny, you remind me in a way of one of my good friends in high school that I knew was always gonna make it in his industry, and he would just find a way because he loved it so much. And like you being on all these shows, not just this one, but you're on the Michigan Bros Grow Show, you go on Medical Mondays, you go on a lot of other shows like regularly, and you're probably one of the most, I'd say, prominent cannabis podcaster creators out there in terms of hours of content and stuff created. But when you're that passionate about something, you just find a way to make it work in that industry eventually. Like my buddy, he loved lacrosse was his thing. His name was Mike. And I just knew like from high school, he was the guy out there like throwing the lacrosse ball at the wall by himself for like hours after practice. And like he went on to, play in college and then he did some coaching and he worked at pro shops and he always worked in the industry and he was always stoked. He loved it. It was his life, but he made it his life and he enjoyed it. It was never like he got burnt out on it because he really genuinely had the passion for it. And it was something that, he loved and still loves. If I called him today, I'm sure he's working some coaching job at some college. And I'm really happy for him because he seems really happy and he's got a good relationship with his sort of purpose, I think, in life. And I think when you meet people who have those callings, oftentimes they seem pretty well adjusted and happy, at least you know, grateful for having a position within something that they enjoy so much because it
Yeah, I
maybe
mean, I
wasn't
get
always
to
that
do
way.
what I enjoy, man. I mean, that imagine not dreading going to work. You know what I mean? You looking forward to getting up. You're like, oh, what am I gonna do? Oh yeah, I gotta do that because I'll get that done or what. I mean, I just came back from Barcelona and then Berlin. We're going to be going to Toronto. I'm getting to see the world at the same time and talk to growers from around the world, like handshake, talking to people, meeting people in the industry. It's fucking awesome. I don't know how you couldn't be happy about that. I don't know why you would want. I don't know. I'm
Funny
sounding
enough,
like
it's
a
not for
commercial
everybody. Some
now.
people would
Yeah.
hate having to travel around. Some people are homebodies and they love, I want to stay here on my farm here in the same state that my dad had his farm on and I'm not leaving, like,
Yeah,
and
but you've
I get
seen
that life
that.
too.
You've seen that. You can go back to that. I mean, why don't you
And
see some other stuff too?
I mean, I
I'm
live in
I'm all
San
for
Diego,
travel. Go ahead, Matthew.
right? Oh, I mean, I was trying to make saying that jokingly. I live in San Diego, so like I've been to other places, and I don't. I do appreciate the travel or the new experience, the novelty of it usually, but
It's always nice to
I
come
don't know.
back.
I think it's always nice to come back, and also, it is a different like standard of living and that kind of thing.
I will
So
admit,
sometimes,
as much as I
yeah,
do love
Jack,
it here, it's nice just to get a little change of pace. Like
for
my anniversary
sure.
trip, we go to San Luis Obispo area, and it's just more kind of like where I went to college, the San Marcos area here in North County, where it's a little bit slightly more rural than where I'm currently at, and it's got definitely got more developed since I've been there, but and in both cases, but just a lot of lush open green and I guess being from Ohio, it makes me feel more like at home in a sense, a little bit more agriculture within the city limits area, and really good fresh produce. Not that we don't have great fresh produce down here. It's just different. I feel like their leafy greens are a little bit better up there for whatever reason than down south. And I could be totally wrong about that, but that's my experience.
Well, like going up into like the mountains, like in Julian and other places too. I definitely I like that feeling as well. Um, and you get a lot of it, especially if you're going up a little bit further into like Rainbow, California, and further still into the valley. So I definitely have an appreciation for that. But I guess what I'm saying is that when it comes to like um those are like that's like scenery, right? Like you're saying. But when it comes to actually like the rigmarole of dealing with people or social convention and things like that,
The actual
yeah,
traveling
some people,
process is what I hate. The being in the
yeah, me
airplane, the
too.
going through the TSA, the getting your bags checked in, the paying too much for, oh, I have a carry-on bag and now what used to be free is now $40 or whatever. And it's just like, they nickel and dime you everywhere. If you get the cheapest flight, you end up paying the same amount as like the average or even more expensive flight because they're like making you pay for the air to breathe as you walk through the airport. But
Basically.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, we experienced a little bit of that,
Now,
but
if all of that, yeah, if all of that's being taken care of, it's a different experience.
it
exactly.
is when it's
Like
all comped, but at the same time, even if it's comped, I'm just a little bit of a homebody in that I like being in my groups of people that I'm friendly with, and I do like going to conventions every now and again. Like I wouldn't go every single weekend. You know what I mean? I'd go probably once a month if they were every month here.
Yeah, that's
Uh,
about what my that's I mean, even that's quite a lot once a month. And so and that's kind of fast, and I don't think that's normal, but we're just trying to hit what we can right now. But yeah, I think that's even a lot, especially when you're going long distance.
If
Even
it's for
short
something
distance,
really
just seeing
serious
people.
too, it can be very distracting and somewhat like disruptive, right? But if it's just like to go have a time, like Jack was doing, I think that's also very different too. So it can be a thing for sure.
Been very, it's been worth it for us for sure. Just the different people that we've met, and it's like we're going like, especially the last one where we went to Berlin. I mean, that's a just an emerging market. They just legalized literally the 1st of April, and like they're talking to people there, and they said some grocery store owners were saying that you couldn't. It was funny because our booth we just ordered some grow tents that had shipped direct to us with our lights so that we just set up some grow tents and had something to hang our lights from, right? The grow tents. And we had just as many people asking us about the grow tents that we did the lights because you can't even find a grow tent in Germany right now because everybody's buying out all the supplies. So it was like, a lot of people wanted to talk to us. We'll just say that. So it made it pretty successful for us. It was pretty cool.
There's a hole in the market that would be filled soon, probably by all the if they allow it, Chinese manufacturers like Vivosun and others that make good quality tents for a decent price. You can get them on
Yeah.
Amazon. There's not the only one, there's a bunch of other ones. That's the one that I happen to use, and it happened to outperform some more expensive tents that were tested, which just made me laugh a little bit because sometimes you don't always get what you pay for, like in terms of reflectivity. Like one of the cheaper ones was one of the best, and
I'm getting so
that just
tired of the silver. Why aren't they white? Why isn't everybody switched to white by now?
Um, I think it's because silver is higher reflectivity in Migros testing. He showed it was a slightly higher percentage. I think the white is slightly more even across like the canopy, like the bounce, and it's a little bit softer on the eye, but the Mylar is in terms of efficiency, the highest efficiency. The diamond Mylar type things have the
Thought like
most.
the Orca paper was the highest efficiency, and that's white.
That could be. I think I
Like
don't know if he did do the
the
testing
inside
with
of the
Orca.
sphere testing is painted white.
That's true. Yeah, so I mean,
Also, because of the nature of those kind of reflections, like you'll see it plainly, like aluminum foil, like some facets are going to be shinier, some are less shiny. Maybe that's just due to where you're positioned, but whereas like a uniform, this is just me speculating, right? But the uniformness of just like solid white, I feel like would be better somehow, or at least easier to measure, maybe.
I thought so too until I watched the par test and I saw the diamond mylar, which is a very consistent. Like they had the low grade mylar, which is more of just like a bubble wave, and then they had like the diamond mylar that has like little pinpoint type. You know, every
Oh,
inch there's
interesting.
10 dots, and each dot is a perfect square. And so the reflectivity off of something like that is gonna be more uniform than uh just sort of like a mirror or a mylar sheet that's waving off your fan that it's got like a hot spot and like it's waving that shifts around a little bit as it moves. So it's interesting stuff for sure. I will say it's comparable. The only thing I would say is don't be like a dog doctor unless you're sponsored by somebody who's paying you to put a black thing inside of your tent. Black, literally, he did a test himself the one time and it was like 20% less or something like on camera. And I was just like, oh no, dog doctor. You got to get like a white one or a Mylar reflectivity version. Like they kind of make those like psychedelic stickers that are like, really shiny. Like some cars are wrapped in that like silver with like a rainbow reflective like gloss finish. I feel like you could get something like that.
Oh, like those metallic or like pearlescent ones. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, don't be covering your Mylar walls with more shit. Just go with the Mylar
Yeah, don't
walls.
hydro dip your tents. Oh
Tents are so like I know people love to hate on them, like especially if you get into like the Instagram. I don't know if it's still
It's
like
so
this, but
convenient though for a lot of reasons.
oh man, people would shit on me so much every time. Oh,
wow,
you
people don't
fucking
like
tent grower.
tents.
They just use it as like a demeaning because like, oh, I've got a
Oh, you
grow
mean like in
room, so you're just
disparaging,
a
like, oh, you're
fucking
just a
tent
tent
grower. It's a
grower? Yeah, but
pejorative.
it's a secured space. Like I don't
It's
know what to say.
that you could break down
Don't
and
have a ton
move.
have a growth chamber. Come on now.
It's a portable room.
Yeah.
That's it.
It's a portable grow room,
It's a
honestly.
portable grow room,
Exactly.
exactly.
And they work so fucking well. I've seen them work better than a lot of people's grow rooms because the uniformity of the light reflecting. You don't have an open wall. Like a lot of people have like three white walls and then they have a walk
Hmm.
path. And that open wall, you're losing a shit ton of light. Your yield is going to be lower than you would in like two 4x8 tents or something in that same
My,
room.
my very first grow, my home grow, is I had a space that I wanted to make my big grow, but I just put up a tent in that space and I built the room around it eventually. It took a while. It took I've got a few harvests out of that tent before I even was done. But I just took my time and built the room around it and then pulled the tent down.
I think that's the way to do it, honestly, because they're so affordable. I mean, in relative terms of like what you're talking about in terms of building out a grow room, otherwise, painting and, getting everything set up. Um, yeah,
It really
there's
helps with the light leaks if you're flowering. Because yeah, sometimes that could be a real pain in the ass getting a room light tight.
especially because you're not potentially running on the same light cycle as like the sun. Your sun
Right.
might be
Yeah.
out while your plants are during their night period. And if you have a grow room that's not perfectly sealed and there's light from the sun pushing through into there, you're gonna very likely deal with hermaphrodite issues with your plants. But yeah, I think we've advocated for the tents. We've made the point. A lot of people here are tent growers or have been, and even if you do, we had one of our most popular episodes was like tents versus grow rooms, actually, I think. So maybe we'll have to do the throwdown again, bring it back up because that was like a 7,000 listen episode or something, and we get like 2 or 3,000 on our average. So it's like more than double our normal. People loved that when they went back and re-listened to it and probably were commenting like, "Grow rooms are the best. No, tents are the best." And just like keep on growing, and they do, which is the best thing. We're still fucking overgrowing it, and even if you're like myself and having a little grow break, it's all right. You can get back into it. Just takes a few days, maybe one day, well, a few hours, a few minutes. Get yourself set back up, clean it up, pop that seed, pop the seed, and then you'll feel more. The fire is lit under your butt to get everything together.
Yeah, because now you got a baby and you got to take care of it. You don't want to be a baby
By the way,
murderer.
Jack, did you want to, unless we want to talk about something else, I can save it for next session. But I have a couple of like maybe 1 or 2 minutes of video, which we can intersperse with some conversation about budworms in case people are dealing with them. It is late April, it is spring. So now is the time to be prepared for summer and autumn.
I'm open to
That
that for
wasn't a
sure.
very
I was thinking because I thought I was going to be gone next week, but it's actually the week after that I'll be gone. So that threw me off a little bit. And then I also saw XYZ Vector tagged me and said, I'm running 28-hour days. That is impossible without a grow tent, which I would just add to that last bit of our conversation. That's true. If you want to manipulate your
That's a good
lighting
point.
cycle outside. I guess it's not technically impossible. It'd be more difficult to achieve but a grow tent makes it very easy to manipulate your grow light cycle to anything. It could be 18.6, it could be 17.7, it could be 16.6. I've messed around with all of those. 24 on, 0 off. You could go 20 on, 4 off. You could, 13 and 10, or 11, I should say, 11, 13. And yeah, you can really get funky with it and mess around. So tents are certainly providing a lot of cool stuff. But Matthew, it seems like you've got some cool video potentially lined up. I don't think I allowed you to share screen. So let me click this button here. And then I say multiple participants can share it simultaneously. So if you do have it lined up, you can pull that up whenever. And we'll check out some budworm action.
Yeah, so this is just a little video presentation. I'm working on a series of videos right now about I'll probably not be able to get all the ones I wanted done, actually, to be honest, because cool stuff is happening in the background for me. So this is a little bit on the breaker, but I want people to get this information. So people on the cheap home grow are going to see this first, this little tidbit. So this is part of a section about budworm movement for 2024. And also, I guess you could apply this to other pests too. But this is mainly about the USA. But I have a video for South Africa, and I also have a video for South America in general. So I know we have somewhat of an international audience, and I've worked with people in various parts of the world. So I think it's helpful to see how these different areas are affected by each other through trade and also other stuff. So without further ado, basically, I'm going to start and stop this video a little bit to talk about a certain section. So here we're going to see this is a map of the USA, and this has a bunch of I don't have the key up here, but this is different regions of the US. And if you're not from the US, and even if you are, you might not realize it, but the main regions are like this middle brown section is mostly Great Plains. The western area is also some of that, and also mountains and desert. And then if you go more easterly to like that sort of forest green color, and even down into Florida and up into the like Maine and that sort of thing, those are there's obviously the Appalachian Mountains, and sort of the eastern forest area as well. So those are like the three main biomes of North America. So when the budworms come in, we're going to say they kind of start in the west and the southwest. I don't know if the music or any other things are playing, but this is kind of how they start. You can kind of see them moving from the southwest, and then they move up into the Pacific Northwest, also into the Great Plains area, and also into the East Coast as the year, sort of goes. What's interesting about this, though, what's important, I think, for a lot of people to realize is that, especially in the middle where this biggest moth is sort of represent, this is the Corn Belt area, basically. And if you live in and around the Corn Belt, you know that budworms are a huge problem. And maybe you don't know this, but it is from this area they can kind of move out. And so what'll happen is that when winter comes, these moths will lay, or the larvae will pupate underground and they'll stay dormant. If you've never had budworms, though, I will say a little bit about their biology. Their life cycle is about 2 to 4 weeks, again, depending on temperature. So closer to the equator, you get more generations per year. Further up into the north, you get less generations per year. But a single female can maybe reproduce 500 to 1,000 eggs. That's a lot, obviously. And you don't see them, they're very small. And the larvae that come out of it, especially for cannabis, is a problem because they immediately start burrowing. So you only have a small window of opportunity to do something about it. And also a single adult can move like 750 kilometers. That's like from Texas to Arkansas, in like a 30-day life, right? So that's pretty impressive. And so multiple generations will move over time, like migrating birds will. But they'll like get a certain distance, die, reproduce, and then the cycle continues and they keep going, basically, if that makes sense. And let's see here. Let me just. So the moths will start
Can I jump in
even
for one
in South.
second?
Yeah,
Because
absolutely.
you use kilometers, and although 30% of our audience roughly is international, the 70% who use freedom units would probably like to know, um, what was the number? You said 720 kilometers. I think that's
750.
460, 750.
750.
I think I converted it and it was 460 miles,
That sounds about right.
which is quite a distance. That was the first question I wanted to ask. And then when I saw that pop up, I was like, oh, interesting. That is a lot further than I was expecting.
As an American, I definitely feel the like the weight of the miles that you just said feels more than the 750 that I've had to like learn. So it's kind of like a language in that way. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like when you hear it in a scientific context, it's like one thing, but when you're like, oh, 460 miles, if I drove that far, that's
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
that'd be quite a ways. And that would take a long time, at like 60 miles per hour. That's 460 minutes broke down into, I'm not great at math on the spot, but that's quite the hike.
No, definitely. And mostly this is because they're windswept. So a lot of it is the wind carrying them in the jet stream. They go up like 10 meters or more. And a long time ago, actually, moths came in through the Bering Strait and perhaps also just through the ocean. And then that's what seeded this population here in the Americas. But we even have populations that come in, they get sprayed with DDT and other kinds of nasty pesticides, or at least in the past they were, and still more in South America. So those populations, also with the environment being very disparate, we get these really souped up populations, and then they come up through South America and into like Mexico. So we have corn and soy and sorghum that's produced in like Sinaloa. Jalisco is really big for corn production. That's what this is sort of this graphic is trying to depict here. I bring it up because these populations then enter into the U.S. So that can be an issue. Here's the corn belt that I was talking about earlier. So if you live in a state that's in the like light green areas or or really any of the green areas for the most part, up in the center there, some research estimates that maybe 1 hectare can make 50,000 moths, 1 hectare of corn. And if you can see from the legend, or yeah, 1 hectare it was, and that's like I think I'm forgetting how many acres that is, but it's like a nice round number, like what is like 10,000 or 1,000 or something like that. Even I'm forgetting in the moment. But
So
as
we
you can
gotta, we
see, there's
gotta,
like
we just gotta store up a bunch of corn for like a couple years and then just agree to not grow corn for a year
I
to get
like
rid of
this a
these buggers.
plan. Yeah, exactly right. Let's starve them out. I know.
But
I
this
wish it
graph,
was that.
Imagine
Matt,
if we
this
Just
didn't
graph just
grow corn
shows
for one year. Like
corn.
how
I
much
know,
that would
right?
change the world. Like
It would change the world, and maybe in some good ways.
it would make a lot of people starve, probably,
That's
unfortunately,
true
because it's
too,
in
though. Yeah,
everything, and we
unfortunately.
supply so much of the world with so much. Not that it's great quality, but it's
Yeah.
their
Mao
calories.
Zedong tried that already. It didn't work out very well.
So Matt, this graph just shows the corn production, not the bugs, and on that one, right?
Yeah, this is just corn production. This is actually just
Okay,
I just wanted to kind of illustrate where this corn belt is.
got you. Yeah, yeah.
So if people who are growing in these areas or around these areas, and even if you're not, as the arrows kind of imply, these populations will like grow up and then they'll radiate out. And so just kind of an idea that like these populations are kind of constantly concentrating and then diffusing across the US, just to give an idea. Now, this information here is a little bit out of date, 2022, and this is just industrial hemp and some other things, but obviously, if you don't know this, the hemp craze from 2018 for various reasons is declining pretty rapidly. I think 2024 or the end of 2023 was like the lowest in since 2018. But I do want to say that there's some increases going on in places like Kansas, South Carolina, Maryland, and Washington, at least according to some of this research. A little bit more production area for floral production, which of course you're going to care about with budworms, right? In Oregon, Minnesota, Illinois, and Pennsylvania. Um, but as you can see, also still floral production going down in hemp in many places. And I'm just going to switch here because one of the most important things is also that for 2024, there are, and you can look this up, the USDA makes predictions about temperature changes and hydration changes for the season so that farmers can get an idea about what they should plant and where and how much and that kind of a thing. And what's interesting is that there are a lot of places where the temperature outlook is going to be quite a bit above or likely to be above typical. So that would be in the Pacific Northwest mostly, kind of Texas area in the south here. If you live in Alaska, if you live in the Northwest, it'll be a little bit warmer perhaps. And then also around here where the nice mitten is in Michigan and that sort of thing. And then also precipitation is expected to change below in Pacific Northwest, a lot below in the same sort of Texas southern area, and above more than normal precipitation happening. Where would you call that? Is that like how would you non-Californians refer to this area?
The South.
The
Yeah,
South, right? Basically.
Yeah, I would
the
say the
South
South.
Yeah.
excluding Texas.
And how accurate are these predictions usually? Do you know, Matt? Some every prediction that I've seen from weather and economic forecasts has been wrong.
Yeah. How many of those do you consume?
Well, I for a spell I was consuming quite a bit,
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
but
we
yeah,
can
not so
consume the
much
weather every
anymore.
single
Did
day,
you
and a lot
did
of
you look
people
at the Farmer's
experience.
Almanac? Did you look at that?
Yeah, I can't say that I could tell you the moon phase particularly and how much that's going to impact. But no, I wouldn't necessarily know how accurate they are.
Right.
But one of the reasons I wanted to bring it up was because there's this nice graphic here, and we can come back to it. So I'm hoping actually, since you bring it up, Tao, that people can take a look. So this is actually showing what's called the spring bloom index, and it's and the anomaly of this index. So places where it is here, let me just change this for myself so I can read it. So if it's red and darker red, there's going to be earlier days of spring or heat, and places where it's blue, it's going to be later, if that makes sense. And then here, this is the leaf index, which I think is like the first amount of like plant growth, if that makes sense. So like truly kind of like spring. And we can see that some places spring is gonna start, it's gonna spring a lot earlier. Here, I'll go back to that right here. So in some places it's expected to be a lot earlier than others. But we've already passed April 4th, so I guess we could come back. You can see why I'm trying to get this info out. My videos are just not going out early enough. This is a section about South Africa, which I won't deign to talk much about, except to say that in case you know somebody in South Africa, or if you are from South Africa, you might know that Free State, Mpumalanga, and Northwest are the areas where they have the most corn production. And it's neat because you can also compare these areas because also South Africa has some aridity and that kind of thing. It's got wind patterns that you would expect. So you would have the moths move maybe, like, for example, if
Directionally,
you were
certain ways.
expecting, yeah, exactly. Like for example, if you had some get into like Madagascar, which is a high invasivity area for pests, they might very easily blow into this area and then kind of blow up. But anyways, that kind of concludes my TED talk for the most
Could you go
part.
back a little bit? Because Tao asked the question that I think I could talk a little bit to, and then we could actually do our own
Oh yeah,
little
which one?
fact
Which part?
check.
Which part?
The rain
Yeah.
portion. So from the rain portion all the way through that little portion where it shows like when the springs are going to happen. So the one with like the green cross section of the US where Spartan said south, so probably like 20
Oh yeah,
seconds.
okay, yeah, that section is.
Yeah, so from here forward, essentially, Tao said how accurate is that? For a long time, they were very inaccurate. There's more recent models that have gotten a lot better. There's like insurances that sell farm insurance, crop insurance, and they use climate models, and within like a 5 to 10% accuracy, they can tell people like probabilities and things like that within like certain plots of their land, so they can predict where they should plant, where they shouldn't plant, and things like that. And it's gotten better and better each year. And they're even using like AI and things like that to make it slightly better. And one of the more recent ones has gotten within a 1% accuracy
Pretty
on
damn
like within
good.
the
Yeah.
last year. And so it's certainly gotten better. But if Matthew goes forward a little bit in the video, we could watch. And Tao, just think about where you're at. And
Yeah.
did you have an earlier spring this year? Because this is
Well,
January.
unfortunately, I don't know what time spring's supposed to spring here because it's my first spring here. But
Well, look at where you're normally from, and then think if you know anybody there. And I'll look here in California and see if it corresponds, because it's interesting. This is the Bloom Index, and we're certainly already.
it
I
definitely
would
is
say it predicted
green.
it earlier than it actually happened here. I'd say we're still
Yeah, a little bit
undergoing the bloom,
earlier.
but it
Yeah, it's
really
actually
depends.
helpful that we have now that we're in the future, quote unquote.
Hmm.
We can go back and actually see. So, did you have something looked up? Because I am actually curious. I didn't actually look it up yet, but I will be putting that in the video when it comes
Now,
out. I just didn't get
Matthew,
it early enough.
now we know where they come from and how they get there. What are we to do about them?
Yeah, that's a really good question.
Yeah.
So
We stock up our corn and we stop growing it for a year and let
yeah,
those
Spartan
bugs
already
just
talked about it. What are
die.
you talking about?
Starve them out.
That's it.
Starve them out.
12
So
gauge birdshot.
yeah, exactly. Very American solution. Actually, lasers might be a solution in the future. We'll see. But since Tao brought it up, and other people are going to want to know, one of the reasons why it's helpful to have predictions that are accurate, is that you can have ideas about when you might start. Like for example, biocontrols. Like at a commercial level, it's even more important because of scale and cost and that kind of thing. But if you're a home grower and you're growing outdoors, for example, especially or in a greenhouse that might not be perfectly sealed, then you're going to want to know when is the best time to apply like a BT, Bacillus thuringiensis, or something like that, BT spray. Or when do I want to set out pheromone traps, for example, if I want to catch some males and know, okay, well, the population is going to increase. Well, if you know that in certain areas it's going to be earlier, then you might step up your game. You might have data, and you might know that in your neck of the woods, let's say, like, I don't know, late summer is when they start being a problem, or maybe in this case they might even become active in like early summer, like May, mid-May, or something like that. So you might spray quicker, you might spray earlier than you normally would, and that might help save your crop because these budworms can be pretty destructive. And I guess one other thing I might say is that, like with regards to the spring leaf index, one of the issues is that we can't starve them out, unfortunately, because Helicobarbazea, the corn earworm, and other moths like it, they feed on like 300 plus different plants, and so if spring springs earlier, then the plants are gonna come back earlier. It means that the populations of the moths are also going to come back earlier too, because we use this thing called like degree days, which is how much, kind of like the biologically active radiation. It kind of tracks how much heat energy is being transferred to like the ground or whatever. And that's versus like a baseline. So is it hotter or less hot than what they take for as typical? Which I forget the number is usually for the U.S. But yeah, you can use that information and make some informed decisions, basically.
Cheaper than the old bird shot and a lot
That might get
quieter,
expensive though.
certainly, especially if with all only like steel shot available, mostly with all the hunting regulations changing and things like that.
Yeah, that's
Like
a good point. We'll
mini,
ask the
like mini
Department
drone
of Fish
only
and
with
Game.
lasers. I thought lasers was the right idea, Matthew. I think that's
I
good.
think so. Maybe orbital lasers for those who are
Ooh, I like
dealing
it.
with a different kind of insect threat.
Or high pitch frequency that fucks up the flapping of their wings. You know, you just pulse this sound that we can't hear, and it'll fuck them up somehow. We got to figure out the paralysis noise or whatever for that budworm moth, and fucking hit them with it. But that gets into like the whole electricity thing, like how much electrical use. I bet lasers is an option. They're using that for other things, so I'm curious they could implement it into IPM and how much it would cost. I think a little solar panel with a little laser cannon. You got free charging with a little battery backup.
A
So
little
even in the
mini air
nighttime,
defense, little mini air defense, fucking laser air defense over your crop. I
like a
love
little
it.
drone flying around that's sniping them from above, and then you got a ground turret fucking blasting them from under the
Yeah,
canopy.
I mean they use it to startle birds and things. So I mean and you only have to have it laze for like, a fraction of a second to like melt their wings or something, or just cook their body like immediately. So it doesn't even blow up like the UAV I showed before that like atomizes them with the propellers, right? Like that's a little bit nicer for for something like cannabis, maybe. Plus, they're active at nighttime, which is not when your crop scouts and your sprayers are usually out. Or for yourself, if you're a home grower, you're not like, I mean, I don't know, maybe during a dark period, but if you're out at night, like, be safe. Like,
Walking
don't
through, getting
climb.
like side sniped by some laser beam, and don't even realize why you got like a spot of cancer on
Oh,
your
I
head
know,
six
right?
years later. Later. Oh, that's
Yeah, when
with
they
that
do those
said,
dazzlers, they have a little like visor to keep it from going up for pretty obvious reasons. Yeah.
smart. Got to build in safety into some of our engineering. I think most of the time, whenever there's a new technology, got to protect the people using it if there's any inherent risk. With that all being said, we're at the point in the show where I hand it over to Spartan Grown to give us final thoughts and shout outs before he gets heading on over to the Michigan Bros Grow Show.
Oh, I just want to shout out everybody who comes out and watches the show every week. It seems like we're growing, man. The chat's popping today. There's a lot of people in chat. So it's good to see that. Leave a comment. That helps the show. And maybe drop a like on there for us. Other than that, I'll be head bopping over to the Michigan Bros Grow Show here in 15 minutes. So catch me over there. I'll see you guys next week. It was good to be here again after my absence. And we'll catch y'all next week. Much love and keep growing.
Always
Peace
happy to
out,
have you
Keep
squad.
back.
Have a
growing.
great night.
last week had all those comments flying. So good stuff. And
Yeah.
we are growing, believe it or not, with slowly but steadily. Like it could be six a week or it could be 20 or 30, but we got new people coming in all the time. So we're always happy to have new growers
Hell yeah.
hanging out with us. Cheers. Thanks again, Spartan. Always good to have Spartan grown, and definitely make sure to check out Michigan Bros Grow Show if you're still looking for cannabis content in 15 minutes when we're all wrapped up here. That'll be going live at 6 o'clock on the West Coast, or I think it's 9 p.m. East Coast time. Yeah. So we got about 15 minutes here. I'm curious if Noah's got any thoughts that he hasn't thrown in there yet. He's been quietly hanging out with us throughout the show, sitting back.
No, I've been listening, learning as always. I definitely had a few comments earlier, but yeah, no, I'm just paying attention, listening intently to the bud worm thing there that Sink Angel was talking about, and intently paying attention to when they're coming to the Pacific Northwest. And uh, I got a hood coming down tomorrow, so I'm looking forward to it, but I know the brutal session I have to deal with tomorrow. But yeah, planning all that. And it was
Well,
a trip earlier talking about memory lane. I've had a very eventful 5 years, 4 or 5 years, however long it's been since I've been on the show. And I thank our former host for bringing me here. Yeah, I feel lucky, man. It's very cool to be around a lot of other people that are passionate about something like I am. I'm kind of a nerd for growing weed, and I've been doing it a long time. I love to do it, and it's cool to be around other people that know exactly what they're doing and have been around it, living that life. It's a different life, you know what I mean? My uncle calls me an outlaw, and it's just like, hey, I've got my medical card and I'm a medical grower, but you know how it goes. It's just a different feel, to be a grower, to be that type of a person.
it's always going to be a
Uh,
little Wild West, man.
it's the wild, wild west. That's a great, great analogy, and I have a blast doing it. And I always have a blast listening and learning from all you guys, and trying to pass on what I know as well. So.
I have we could jump back a little bit to a topic that you didn't get to weigh in on much earlier. And I know you mentioned you've gone through some health complications with like heart stuff. And recently earlier this year, last year, you had a little scooter action going on, but you're still getting out to the grow. I wonder if you have any tips or thoughts on how cannabis relates to longevity, and or if you have any tips or tricks on how to, keep yourself in that grow for as long as possible, and making sure it's at the top quality that you tend to keep it.
Well, totally. It's funny. I was listening, like I said, I was listening intently. I love the Brett Favre reference that you had earlier. I'm a huge Brett Favre fan, and I know how brutal sports are. I broke my wrist playing catch the flag when I was like 14. Really broke it though. I mean, like they were talking about I broke in like 5 spots. They were talking about having to amputate my hand. So I had to stay in the hospital with weights on the end of my elbow and my fingers stringed across, and my wrist is still a little crooked. But I have gout in my big toe, so I've had a lot, and I have arthritis in my shoulder. I've had rotor cuff surgery, so I do a lot of rubs. My buddy, he grows it's a plant called ACDC, and he makes like a rub out of like beeswax, and like I don't know exactly how he does it, but then he gives it to me. Sometimes I'll give him some stuff to make edibles out of, but he gives him that rub, and I rub that on my big toe and on my wrist and my shoulder. And the other thing is being a grower. I think you kind of have to be kind of like organized. You kind of have to be clean. You have to be self motivated, and all those things have made me more attentive as I've gotten older for my own health. Earlier, you were talking, and I was, like I said, I was paying attention, and I heard about your backstory. And man, I don't know how many times hey, I'll just say it. I feel like I got tricked into the ankle surgery that I got, and I shouldn't have. It's on me. Ultimately, you know what I mean. I'm the CEO of me, and you're the CEO of you, and you learn from that. You doctors and trainers and physical therapists. There's some skilled ones out there. Don't get me wrong. I have a good one now, but they'll tell you some stuff that ain't right. You got to be a self advocate for yourself. Being, and I also got into a really bad car accident in 2021 that took me a long time to recover from. Really bad. I don't know if I ever posted any of the pictures in the group chat. I got knocked out first time ever. Uh, Totaled a brand new car, my wife's brand new car, and that brain issue has been messing with me. But I've probably gotten about 98%, but it's taken years. And man, there's a lot that cannabis and can help you with, and then just the actual therapeutic part of growing. Like earlier before the show, we were doing our vegetable garden and we're trimming some of the stuff, and just the gardening stuff. It can be very mentally therapeutic, just the actual physical growing, the physical part of it, but also the plants. I feel the plants really are therapeutic to me, to be around them. So it's that, and I'm sure there's that's not like a science point of view. That's a bro science thing, but
No,
it's
I
just
think
what I feel.
there's studies that
Yeah,
show, like if you look at elderly or young youth, uh, to any age, if people are involved in gardening, almost always it has a positive outcome on their life. Like in very few circumstances does it have negative health benefits. I can think of a few rare exceptions, but almost always when I've looked at like data and anecdotal people that are involved in, they try to encourage people to get involved in gardening because it, I think, shows lots of benefits for longevity. So getting people, being on your hands and knees and digging in the dirt is not necessarily easy, and so getting people out there and moving around in nature and caring for something other than themselves to get up every day, get out of bed and think, I'm gonna go check those plants and see how much they grew. And when you get that harvest, it's a satisfaction that I think is unparalleled. Everything I've harvested ever, whether it's like a green bean, wheatgrass, like whatever I grow, it's just so much more satisfying. And cannabis is certainly not exception there. It's part of that rule. It's extremely satisfying to grow your own, and Noah's garden is a constant reminder of that. And I'm actually more motivated now than ever. I had a lot of stuff busy earlier half of this year, but I'm getting back into the gardening myself, and I'll be happy when I have my garden looking something like this again. And now that we're not talking about all the other side stuff, maybe you could remind us of what some of these strains are that we're looking at now.
this one right here, this is a lemon cherry gelato. It's my second run with it, and I already cut it. And of course, this plant turned out way better than the last one. This right here is T1000. That's purple Urkel crossed with Triangle Kush, and it's very, very good. And this is GD4. This is day 64 right here. Um, the fade is full on, and I'm excited. This GD4, there's a lot of amber crystals on it, and trichomes, and boy, it's gonna be something. I got a couple hours at the table, at the trim table tomorrow. Any grower knows what I'm talking about, but it's a fun feeling. It's a fun feeling to know that it happened. I got it done, and I'm ready to do the next one. I got two duct tape, a wedding cake, and my first time running a Sherbaceo plant coming in right behind it. So they're in fives and sevens, and they need their new shoes, they need their new spot, and these ones are gone, and then I'm putting those ones in. So yeah, a lot of fun.
Constantly keeping it moving. It's real production over there. I love that you keep it so consistent and are always really pulling something down. And you realize the work it is when you've got that much weight and you're constantly having to trim it, and you don't have a staff to do that. You're doing it all by yourself. Just it is hours and hours of work, and I think people really underestimate um, the amount of time that goes into a cannabis crop, even on any scale. Um, the
Oh,
amount of
100%.
people's days that go into this, whether it's a home grow or a massive industrial grow, there's just a lot of commitment and a lot of time. Even more so necessarily, I guess, in a different sense in some of these commercial setups because they have to go through all the legal rigmarole of getting licenses, permits, holding property before they can even grow. Like for most of us, we just like when we're ready to grow, I buy that. You get your tent, you get your seeds, you get your light, whatever, you're good to go. You're the master of your own garden. You get to do it when you want to do it if you're that type of person, you know. And I think, like Noah said, you got to be a little bit organized at times, or it'll teach you to be. It can definitely teach you to be patient or more patient. I consider myself a fairly patient person. That's part of my profession typically. So I'm grateful that I had that going because it seems like a lot of people, especially on the newer side, some of their problems come from lack of patience. They don't want to wait until the medium's dry to water it again. So they overwater because they're just like, they want to do something. Or they don't want to wait for the harvest because they want it now. It's like they want to get that auto flower because it seems faster. Or, you know, they don't want to necessarily learn about the veg versus the flower cycle or whatever it is. Like a lot of the new grower shortcomings, I think, do result out of sometimes a lack of patience or oftentimes it's lack of knowledge. You don't know what you don't know, right? When you're starting anything new, like myself, you at any time, you start something, you've got to kind of take the word of other people within the industry who have some experience, and some of them are going to be more accurate or well, you know, written or spoken than others, and easier to understand and follow. And then sometimes you might get led astray, and it's really an adventure. And I think one worth doing, like we were talking about purpose earlier. Shoot, one great way to have purpose is to have a garden full of plants, and there's part of your purpose. Not to say that it should be your only purpose. Maybe it is for some people, but some advice from my late father. He used to say, um, kind of like on the same lines of like, don't put all your eggs in one basket, but you got to have at least like three things in life. And it didn't matter necessarily what those three things were. It could be you've got your job, you've got your relationship, and you've got your cat or your dog or your car or something that means something to you, that you have at least three major things. So if something happens with one of them, something goes wrong, you know, death, divorce, whatever, um, there's so many potential things that can go wrong with a facet of your life. If it's the only thing that you have, it's gonna be a lot more devastating. But if you got two other things that you really care about at least, then you can continue on and much more easily handle those difficult times. Not that they aren't going to be difficult still, you know, but that said, a little bit of Jack advice passed from my father. He was a great person in my uh, opinion, and I realize now I took for granted, not necessarily him. I loved him very much and appreciated him, but I took for granted how rare, in my opinion, really like high quality, good people are. And this panel is, I think, an exception to that rule. We've got a very high percentage. I'd say every single person who's on this panel and a lot of people in this chat that I've gotten to interact with, everybody for that matter, are, you know, lovely to interact with. And, you know, like in this case, we show up every week for, you know, 263 episodes, right? And we're here for 2 hours. That's something I love, is somebody who's consistent, somebody who is somewhere on time, somebody who is able to, and not that every single one of us was here for all 263, but you know, of the four of us and six of us who are here tonight, I'd say we're like 90% plus of the episodes, which is pretty astronomical to think about. Like that 263 is times two for the hours. So we're talking like 500 plus hours of content that every single one of us has just done for the sake of doing it because we loved it and this was our passion. And I'm so grateful to have each and every one of you here. And yeah, it's a reminder that there are good people out there still, because when you go out into the general society, you see a lot of bullshit. You see a lot of people
Right
yelling
back
at each
at
other
you,
and
Jack.
arguing.
I concur, and everyone in chat too. But then again, you know, at my take is all humans are assholes. That's why I love them all the same. But you know, like when you go on vacation and you hang out with a couple, it's like the best time. But if you were with them on the daily for a month, you probably hate one of them. You know what I'm saying? But I'm just, you know,
They say
just me.
company is like fish.
But
It's good for a few days and then it starts to stink.
there you go. But no, genuinely, I like everyone that I come across in the cannabis world. Even the scumbags, I like them too because they're entertaining. You know what I mean?
And they're
So
reminders. They're helpful reminders that you shouldn't just
yeah,
trust everybody on the internet. That some people will take your money and lie and mislead. But that said,
right.
it's 6 o'clock. We got to wrap it up.
Not everyone is yeah, what they appear to be.
Right. And there's some people that literally just like will copy Spartan Grown or Brandon Rust and like pretend to be them to try and get you to send them a little bit of money for whatever. And so just watch out for that kind of stuff. And that's why we always let you know at the top and bottom of the show, I guess, the start and the finish, where you can find us. Like Matthew Gates, where can we find you?
You can find me a number of places. If you're having trouble with pests, you can contact me at sentinel.com. You can also find my video series that will come out soon, and also other videos about pests in cannabis and other plants on my YouTube channel, Zenthanol. And when it comes out, you can check me out at First Smoke of the Day. I had an interview with them recently. And also, if you're in San Diego, you can check me out next week on Saturday at the Walter Anderson Nursery um, in on Enterprise Street. I'll be there at 9 a.m. So you can check me out there or check out my social media at SyncAngel on X and Instagram for more information.
How long is that running for? From 9 until
Good question. Technically, it seems like it's only 30 minutes if you look it up, but they told me an hour, and it's very informal. You don't have to pay anything or anything. Just show up if you want. I'll be talking about pests generally, but I'm trying to Q&A it a bunch. So if you have burning questions, that's I think the most valuable thing for people.
good stuff. Well, happy to hear that people have the access locally. It's always good that they can find you online in all the right places because, as mentioned previously, there is impersonators out there, believe it or not. So always good to make sure that people know where to find you. Just like Noah the Grower, who's not too many places, so you should definitely be able to find him.
Yeah, I'm Noah the Grower with two E's in my name on Instagram. You can find me there. If you got any questions, you can always shoot me a question. People send me questions. I always try to answer them as soon as I can. And I always have a great time on the show. And I'll see everybody next week.
Always great having you, Noah. Thank you very much. And last and certainly not least of our panelists is the American one.
You can find me in the list of the greatest humans who ever walked the face of the earth. And you can
Yeah,
also
on
find me
Wikipedia.
on IG and yeah, IG is the easiest spot. You look for you start with the American one, and hopefully I'll pop up. The little guy with the American top hat, that's me. And yeah, it's always good to be here. It's the highlight of my weeks these days. So good to see everyone, and we'll catch you next week.
Well, happy to be a good highlight of the week because I know, like many people, we all gotta go do other stuff in between these shows, and it keeps us busy. And sometimes you're banging your knee at work, and you're needing those edibles, and maybe you don't have them all the time. And when you finally get them back, it's extra clutch. And I've definitely been there. So, Tal, thank you very much for joining us this week. Always a pleasure to have you. And I guess last and certainly not least, myself, the host, Jack Greenstock. You can find me on X at Jack_Greenstock. I don't really use the Instagram other than just for messaging. So if you do want to message, if you're on Instagram, you can still message me there. Jack_Greenstock is my backup account on Instagram. So that one doesn't give me notifications for whatever reason. I try to set it up to do it, but it doesn't. So I might get back to you a few days late on that one or weeks. But otherwise, if you don't have the social medias, jackgreenstock47@gmail.com and my website 50strains.com where a few people ordered some books and seeds during 420. I still have some stuff available. It's only 24% off. I didn't do any crazy 420 deals, but I think 24% is a good enough deal to go check it out as well. So cheers to everybody for listening. We always appreciate you all live and afterwards on the podcast. Thank you every week for hanging out with us, and we'll catch you all next week. Cheers. Keep on growing. Peace and love.
Keep growing.